What are you doing?
Finally, facing the truth. It's my turn to talk. I thought I saw something in you. Something good. And that's when I finally realized that all the signs I'd been seeing were correct.
You don't understand.
I lost my way trying to help you find yourself. Not anymore.
I'll make it up to you. I've changed once before. I can do it again.
You've never changed.
Please.
No! It's too late. Once I saw the man behind the beast. Now there's only a beast. I command you to leave.
Please. I won't be able to come back.
I know.
I don't want to lose you.
You already.
My feelings towards INFJs are complicated. Good evening, my friends. This is Paul. If you've watched the title, you're probably on really high defense right now, especially if you're watching this as an INFJ. So, as much as I hate doing this, allow me to make a couple of disclaimers before we continue. First of all, if you are watching this as an INFJ, chances are you probably haven't done any of this stuff. You've probably researched what my preferences are and what makes me happy and what makes me offended, and have taken the necessary measures to be that person that I need. So I thank you very much for that. The other disclaimer is that it's hot, so I've got the fan going. I tried to put it at only half speed, so hopefully it doesn't show up too much, but if it does, I'm sorry guys. I'm a warm-blooded creature. I need my ventilation. INFJs have given me a very interesting history. A lot of them are really, really sweet, and they really care, stupid thing behind me, about making sure that the person that they're speaking to is having his or her needs met to the fullest, while at the same time, because they're not ENFJs, they have introverted thinking as their tertiary function, and most of them do a pretty darn good job of developing it. So good, in fact, that it leads them to having this really cold, detached, logical side that allows them to temporarily turn off their touchy-feely, oh my gosh, let me help you mode to, I have a bone to pick with you, mister. So I'm going to try to look past that side of them and focus on what I actually like about INFJs, because they are my Enigma type. That means that we share no functions in common, and our entire function stack is flipped upside down. So even if the ENFP technically has opposite letters of mine, the INFJ has opposite functions. So those types are my true polar opposite in the Myers-Briggs. However, INFJs, when they have developed their extroverted thinking and their introverted thinking to the same degree, and are willing to use them to work together as opposed to trying to stifle the other one, then they tend to be really nice people. Now, to give a little bit of a practical example of that, one of my best friends is an INFJ. And yeah, I know I talk about some of her faults all the time, but I also think that she does a really good job of knowing what it is that I want before I open my mouth. That intuition of hers is really good at just picking up on patterns before I get a chance to have them erupt from my mouth. One time I was upset, and she could tell that I was upset before I said anything, so she just gave me a hug and just said, "Are you okay?" And I really appreciate that about her, because I might not necessarily pick up on that. I might ask that to people because I realize that I have a weakness in intuition, and automatically assume that maybe I'm missing something, but she could legitimately tell, and it was a direct response to the intuitive patterns she was picking up on. However, because her thinking is tertiary and not inferior, she does know how to stand up for herself every now and then. If I do something that makes her upset, which she has openly admitted to me is almost never, she will tell me, but she'll say it in this half polite, half not type of mode. She's not an extroverted thinker, so she's not going to be like dogmatic about it. But she'll say like, no, I don't feel like that. Thank you very much. And she'll like be smiling and all that. So I really appreciate that INFJs try to kill with kindness. Like, obviously, they're not doormats as much as you would think that they are. They don't just allow people to walk all over them. Some of them do, but I think those people are probably mistyped as ENFJs instead. That's for another video. ENFJs are on a whole different level, but I think INFJs generally do a pretty good job of using their extroverted feeling to know the introverted feeler's needs before the introverted feeler is even aware of what they need themselves. But they're also really good at hearing what I have to say and then acting on what I have to say as opposed to just taking it in for the sake of taking it in. Like, INFJs, they like to gather information. That's why in socionics they're known as INFPs, because their dominant function, introverted intuition, is a perceiving function, which means it takes in, it gathers information. In the case of introverted intuition, and I guess this also applies to INTJs as well, they like to spot patterns and implications and hidden meanings, as opposed to the concrete, obvious stuff that someone like me would pick up on. So that means that I don't have to talk as much as I usually do. I end up doing it anyway because that's what extroverted thinkers do. They just blab whatever is on their mind. And a lot of times INFJs know how to say, I get the point, before I talk too much and end up hurting myself further. Like, a lot of times I'm about to go into this really deep, depressing story that I really don't want to say. Most of the time I end up saying it anyway because, again, I'm an external processor. I gotta do that. INFJs usually can tell that that's coming up, and they'll say something along the lines of, Paul, you don't need to continue. I think I get the gist of it from here. They don't say it in those exact words. I'm trying to say nice things here, so I really hope this doesn't come across as an insult, but INFJs sometimes struggle with being articulate in their words. They sometimes use very abstract, flowery language to describe stuff, but a lot of INFJs that I know will turn off that side of them if they know that it's confusing me. Because, again, extroverted feeling means they care more about the dynamics of the people around them than they do about their own emotions. So for them, it's undesirable if the other person is uncomfortable. For the INFJs as opposed to the ENFJs, INFJs are usually more on an individual, one-on-one type of caring as opposed to trying to fill an entire house worth of harmony. So I like that they can really focus on the friendship and really give it whatever it needs. I'm talking in circles right now. Maybe it's because I'm trying to talk about these really confusing creatures, and trying to talk their language is like making me tired. So this will probably end up being one of the shorter info dumping episodes, but more or less, I really like how INFJs, they like to make sure that my needs are met, but if I ask them what their boundaries are, they're willing to step it up and use their introverted thinking to set the groundwork. Now, a lot of times for them, what's really weird is that it doesn't cross their mind that they would need to set their boundaries. I think it's because they're so used to using intuition that they think that others will use that same intuition to figure out what it is that they don't like. So a lot of times when I ask an INFJ, what makes you uncomfortable, they're like, let me think about that for a bit. Like, they're totally caught off guard by that question. But once they have given it thought, then they are totally capable. It might not be their dominant preference of communication, but they're definitely capable of jotting down a list step by step. And because they're not sensors, especially not introverted sensors, they're not going to be dogmatic and rigid about that list. Like, if there's a tiny little bit of me that goes slightly off track, they're not going to get all mad and say, now, Paul, I told you never to touch me on the back, but you accidentally touched me on this part of the shoulder, which is this close to the back, so I'm going to... No, they're usually pretty forgiving about those little things, unless they're OCD, but That's another issue. Also, another thing that I don't think gets mentioned enough about INFJs is their inferior function is called extraverted sensing. Because it's so low, they usually don't pay much attention to their own surroundings, and if they do, it's to a very limited degree, and oftentimes they don't keep it in their head. Like, I know INFJs can have good memories, but it's usually not their primary focus of perception. They're all about future projections, implications, patterns, so living in the moment is a little bit hard for them. However, because they have extroverted sensing and not introverted sensing, when they put their minds to it, INFJs can really, really savor the moment. And if that moment means something to them, then that moment will stick with them. Well, I don't know if it would stick with them forever, but it would stick with them a pretty long time. Like, I feel like with one of my best female friends who's an INFJ, she doesn't reminisce in these long-winded tangents about the best memories of her life like I did. She will often say, like, yeah, Paul, that was a really good hangout we did, and then, like, leave it at that. It doesn't have to go into all these excessive details, like, Paul, I remember what you were wearing, and I remember that your hair was messy that day. What else was new? You know, she's not going to care about those little details. What she's going to care about is 100% being whatever I need in that exact moment. Now, of course, when you hear it coming from me, it probably sounds like I'm being super selfish. Like I'm using the INFJ as like oh, I can get whatever it is that I want because the INFJs have extroverted feelings. So therefore, I'll just moan and groan about all my problems and they'll fix them. I also think that ISTJs can give a little bit of a give and take to them. ISTJs can often give them new perspectives that they didn't consider because INFJs use extroverted intuition. But because it's so low down on the function stack and so low priority, when we do use it, it often catches the INFJ so off guard, but in a good way, to the point where it legitimately makes them think that maybe, just maybe, their tunnel vision could be wrong. Maybe this view that they've set for themselves could have a side path, maybe a detour. Maybe they've thought about things all wrong. Granted, most of the time it doesn't happen. But I have met quite a few INFJs, and recently an INTJ as well, because they also have dominant introverted intuition, who have said, oh my gosh, I never thought about it that way. Like, that's really good insight. And so I really like that they're willing to try out a new thing that they wouldn't have otherwise considered. Not saying they don't like new things. They're not like me, where I'm terrified of changing things, but I think if they have a plan in mind, it's really hard for them to think of a backup plan, whereas I think of backup plans all the time, and I think that really helps them out a lot. I also think that INFJs, even if they don't want to admit it, they appreciate the fact that introverted feelers, especially in the tertiary, aren't that great at naturally expressing their emotions and their needs. Like, oftentimes it's on a when needed basis. So I think what I really like about INFJs is that they don't try to push me. I'm a liar. I said this would be one of the shorter episodes. I had more to say anyway. They don't try to, like, draw out my emotions. They don't say stuff like, now, Paul, it's unhealthy for you to bottle everything up. Talk to me. Let's unpack this. No. That's what the ENFJs do. Again, we're not talking about those guys. The INFJs will say, if you want to talk about this, I will be here for you. You can take as much time as you need. Not saying this is exclusive to INFJs, but I'm saying that their type can and will do that instead of being pushy and saying, let's all share our feelings. I mean, I think I appreciate those statements more than most ISTJs, but I'm still going to be very uncomfortable if I'm forced to do it. I want to be given the option to say no thank you, as opposed to being like, if you don't share your feelings, Paul, we are going to stare at you weirdly because you were the one person who didn't get anything out of this retreat. Thank goodness at the last retreat I didn't have to say anything and no one cared. So, bottom line, to try to keep this as concise as possible, INFJs are really good at knowing my needs. They're also decently good at expressing their own if I bring it up first. They tend to be pretty good at really savoring the moment when we're hanging out. They're good at future planning. They are actually more logical than people give them credit for. In fact, quite a few INFJs that I've spoken to have, well, I shouldn't say spoken to, quite a lot of INFJs that I've heard of and spoken to often test very close on the T to F spectrum of the Myers-Briggs letter system. And while I have a few thoughts on how the letters are incorporated into Myers-Briggs, I do think it's because probably more than any other type, the INFJ just really is aware of their tertiary function and really makes an effort to make sure that it's not ridiculously childish. Granted, a lot of times it is so childish that they don't know how to explain their reasoning, but we're not here to criticize them. We are here to pat them on the backs, not literally, that might be encroaching on their boundaries, and tell them, you're doing a good job. Keep it up. We are validating your... I know they like their emotions validated, but I don't know if I just did or not, so we're validating your good moments. And hey, if you're an INFJ and I've left something out, then feel free to, give yourself a moment to pretend to be an introverted feeler. We're going to say, you are an introverted feeler for one day. Tell me, what do you think about all this praise gushing up on you? What would you like people to say about you? What are your deepest... You don't have to share if you don't want to. I know you're probably cringing as you're hearing that, but I would genuinely like to know, is there something I missed? Is there a good side of you that most people don't recognize? Have you received a compliment that someone has given you where you're like, not enough people say that about me. Now I feel like I actually mean something in the world. Please let me know down in the comment section, and just comment anyway, because I prefer that over likes and dislikes. So until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. And you INFJs may be enigmatic, but that doesn't make you awful. Bye!